What creates personal dishonesty? Let's get right into this one. On the board, as usual, I have a lot of stuff that is worth focusing on if you want to cultivate personal honesty, and a lot of stuff to avoid. Now, personal honesty is not something that we naturally have. In fact, we have the opposite. Our mind is not an honest actor. Our mind is deeply programmed for deception and storytelling, actually. Our mind is very programmed to deceive itself. Our automatic stream of thought is not about what is honest and what is true. Our automatic stream of thought is more about how can we get more of what we want. Our automatic stream of thought is usually about changing some kind of circumstance to serve us. Our automatic stream of thought is very programmed for survival. It's very programmed to see problems in our life and solve them so that we can feel more comfortable with our conditions. So right off the bat, self-deception and storytelling are what create, of course, self-deception. This is what creates a lack of personal honesty or just personal dishonesty. So storytelling, number one. And basically, the way to, I guess, unwire that and really to undo that is through questioning. So instead of actively believing, unconsciously actively believing, the automatic stream of thoughts that's happening in your mind basically at all times, you want to actually question it. Why does my mind never shut up? Why does my mind always find some kind of thing to be angry at or to be unsatisfied with, to create suffering, really? Why does my mind always want to change things? My mind always wants to change things. It always thinks that what I have really isn't enough, that I need more of this or more of that. It always seeks new things, new experiences to feel good about itself. And really, we have a lot of drives in us that have absolutely nothing to do with being honest, and instead, they have everything to do with just deceiving ourselves so that we can improve our conditions to help us to survive. That's what I'm really getting at with this point. And that is primarily what our mind is wired to do. Our mind is just not wired automatically to care about what's true. This is an entirely different thing from basically what we're ordinarily programmed to do. So actively questioning our own thoughts, actively questioning our own beliefs, actively questioning our own assumptions about ourselves, about other people, about the world. This is extremely important. And a good way to tell that you are basically being full of BS is when you're thinking something and it's really bringing you a lot of frustration, anger, closure, being very closed, being very rigid, and you can't open your mind up to anything else. That is a very pure sign of some kind of belief that is running your life for you. An example is like, this person should not do this. And I want you to feel how closed and rigid and fixed that is. And this is a tricky one because really our belief about what another person should or shouldn't do is nonsense. And we don't really like to admit that. We think people should behave in very specific ways. People should do this and not that. People should like this and not that. And we have a very hard time handling otherwise. We have a hard time handling people who think very different from us, have very different cultures, who not only this, but actually have very radically different worldviews that would completely threaten ours. This is a very scary thing for us to actually handle. And really, our beliefs are not based off what's true. Our beliefs, our personal assumptions, our personal bullshit is based off what is going to help us to survive. And our mind will tell stories, storytelling. Our mind will tell stories about how, that group over there is nonsense. That's nonsense over there. And that the things that I prefer, the things that I like, are the good ones, the best ones, what's true. And we have a lot of self-bias. Really, our mind is very biased and it's very selective in what it wants to see versus what it doesn't want to see. Our mind likes to make us look like we're the good guys and that those guys out there are the bad guys, that those guys have problems with them. There's nothing really wrong with me. And even if you're fairly, modest, you might not think that thought, but there's a whole emotional tone that speaks otherwise. There's a whole emotional tone to how you say something, how you relate to a person that is actually showing how you really think and feel about situations. There's a whole relationship to life that is really saying more about what you truly think and believe and feel than what you are, telling yourself. Once again, this problem of self-deception is something that has to be taken very seriously if we want to cultivate personal honesty, because the truth is that we are not personally honest. Personal honesty is a skill that has to be developed. Personal honesty is not something that just comes naturally. Personal honesty is something that has to be actively worked on again and again and again and again and again and taken very seriously. Personal honesty is not an easy thing to do. It is very courageous, very difficult, and basically no one is personally honest. I want to say that one more time. Basically no one is actually very honest with themselves. That might seem kind of pessimistic, but really, personal honesty is not something that most people care about. Most of mankind is stuck in stages of psychological development that has to do with survival. Getting my needs met and not much else. This is where most of mankind is presently at. It won't be like that forever, but this is the current circumstance. And really, our mind is so fixed on the things that we want, from relationships, from career, out of life, the food we want to eat in the morning. It's so biased towards ourself, our preferences, our personality, what works for me, and it is very selective in what it chooses to see and what it chooses not to see. And there's parts of ourselves that our mind likes to keep hidden from itself, like our reactivity, our shame, our guilt, our anger, our fear, our terror, our anxiety, our inability to generate a result in this area of our life, our incompetence at times, our blatant lack of care for other people, our blatant stupidity, how we distract ourselves, how we avoid ourselves, how we lie to ourselves. These are all things that our mind loves to act as though it doesn't exist when it actually does. So it's easy to just tell a story in your mind and then just believe it. Like, oh, I'm personally honest. And then it's done. The whole thing is done. The whole investigation is done. Just like that, because you told one little story in your mind and you believed it automatically. So you want to actively question whether or not you're even honest with yourself at all. And personal honesty is like a spectrum. There's, I guess we can say radical dishonesty on one end and then radical honesty on the other. And then a whole bunch of gray area in between. And you probably fall somewhere on that spectrum. And unless you are actively developing the skill of personal honesty, you probably fall more towards the dishonest side of the spectrum, which I'm not viewing this in like a moral way where it's like, you should be honest. Like it's like an upstanding virtue that like you have to do or else you're a bad person. It's just about getting clarity in life. Honesty in this context is about health, well-being, psychological well-being, basically overall well-being, and developing clarity in your life about yourself, your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings, how you relate to life, and also self-improvement, because if we want to improve ourselves, we have to be very honest about where we are screwing up, what our blind spots are. where we're closed, fixed, rigid, stuck, full of shame, guilt, anger, fear, anxiety, where we're dishonest with ourselves. We have to have a sincere intention to figure out where we are dishonest with ourselves. Rule number one to personal honesty is admitting that you're not honest. If you can't admit that, then the whole investigation is done. If you just automatically think you're honest, what's the point of continuing? So, our emotions are a massive guiding force for honesty. Our emotions are not these like fluffy, airy-fairy things. Actually, it's a very intelligent like guiding system, really. It is very profound. If you tune into your emotions, they're actually trying to tell you something. That when you're suffering psychologically, there's something out of balance. There's something in you to be investigated. And really, any avoidance or distraction from this stuff, avoidance and distraction from this stuff that has to be investigated, is itself another form of personal dishonesty, which I'm going to talk about very soon. So our emotions, kind of like pain, is actually telling us something, and we have to develop an ear for it so we can actually listen to it and get what it's telling us. A lot of our emotions, when we have beliefs about this person, beliefs about that, this person is so stupid and full of crap, for example. Just notice how a lot of these kinds of things make you feel, and then really get that for as long as you hold these beliefs, you're going to continuously feel that way. For as long as this is how you think about the world, for as long as this is how you relate to the world overall, as long as this is your relationship to the world, you're basically going to be suffering a lot more than you, in a sense, really have to. It's going to be a lot of unnecessary suffering. So our emotions, if you're self-aware enough, are actually telling you where you're very closed, where you're rigid, where you're dishonest. And they are fantastic communicators of this kind of stuff. Notice what makes you angry. Notice what makes you feel ashamed of yourself. Notice what makes you feel closed and blocked and physically tense in your body. Notice the physical tension in your body. Notice the sense of struggle in your muscles. That's why they're all tense. There's just a struggle, a lack of openness, a lack of acceptance, a lack of clarity. It's just some turmoil happening under the surface, and we got to see that and be honest about that. Notice how our body is communicating to us. Notice how, of course, our emotions, like this, there's a relationship between our body tension, our openness, and our emotions. And really, we need to be very aware and receptive to these things. Most people are very disconnected from their body. They don't spend time actively bringing awareness into their body and feeling what's going on in there, seeing the turmoil, seeing the tension in their gut, the closeness in their heart, the raising of their shoulders, the tensing in their forehead, and the tensing in their arms, how everything is held in such a mechanical and rigid way, how we are clinging on and kind of grasping and holding and clenching ourselves so tightly because of how scared we are, really. And all of this is basically a sign of personal dishonesty, personal BS, really. Emotional dysfunction. So self-deception and storytelling, we have to actively question absolutely everything about ourselves. The stuff you love the most, the stuff that you cherish the most, is the most worth questioning. That is usually where a lot of your stuff is. Your most cherished political belief, your most cherished belief about relationships, your most cherished belief about spirituality, your most cherished belief about career or the economy, whatever it is, the idea that you love the most, question that one. All the stuff that you are most identified with and cling to and hold yourself, or hold on to, attach your sense of self to them, question those. Because this is where a lot of your stuff is hiding. So moving on, avoidance and unwillingness to notice it. So we have to have an openness to seeing what is true about ourselves. And really, if you do this properly, one day you will maybe want to throw up. You will probably want to throw up with how radically dishonest you've been for so long and have just let yourself get away with it because you just had no idea, because it was unconscious. Your automatic storytelling mind was automatically just doing this stuff without you even really knowing it, and you believed it the whole time. So really, avoidance is something that we have to notice and be honest that we're doing. Avoidance of our emotions, avoidance of being open. We're too closed. We have to be honest about how we're being closed or being defensive or being reactive. A lot of our emotions are such a dead giveaway for this stuff. Emotions are deeply intelligent. Emotions are deeply wise. They are fantastic communicators that have to be listened to. This is not a purely intellectual thing. There's a deep emotional component to this. A very profound emotional component. It's probably dominantly emotional. It is dominantly emotional rather than purely intellectual. So avoidance is massive. Avoidance is a form of dishonesty because there's something true. When there's avoidance, there's something that exists. There's something that is. There's something that is true, and we don't want to see it. We are being selective in what we want to see, and we're pushing other things away. This is a form of dishonesty. I'm categorizing it as a form of dishonesty. There is something that is real that we don't want to acknowledge, that we would rather hide from. We would rather put our attention elsewhere for who knows what reasons. Maybe it makes us feel insecure. Maybe it threatens us in some kind of way. It makes us feel threatened, insecure in whatever way. That's really why we're avoiding it. If it wasn't so threatening to us, if we didn't perceive it, keyword is perceive. If we didn't perceive it as threatening, we wouldn't avoid it. Just like how we don't avoid chocolate chip muffins or bananas or whatever your favorite food is, because you don't really perceive it as threatening. You like it. So all the stuff we avoid is the stuff that we are most reactive against. We have a very skewed idea of it, very skewed relationship to it. And it's where also a lot of our most dishonest and unconscious stuff is stored, where a lot of our shadow is stored. And once again, I got to point out this one thing. Our mind hides from itself. Our mind has a bunch of crap hidden in it that it hides from itself, that it itself doesn't even want to notice about itself. And instead, it creates a story about how it's not true or how it's the good guy or whatever. Create some kind of narrative and then we believe it and we go on. So this avoidance, this storytelling, this is all part of personal dishonesty. We want to develop questioning and an openness to seeing what is true, what is the case. Even if it brings us some temporary emotional discomfort, eventually it will. We're going to have to face some very uncomfortable things happening inside of ourselves because really, if you look at your body right now, it's always struggling. There's always tension somewhere. Your arms might be a bit tense, your jaw, your gut, your abs clashing against each other. One of the best ones. Heart might be, your chest might be a bit contracted. Just find some place in your body right now that is struggling against another spot in your body. One muscle simply fighting another muscle. Moving on, distraction. Distraction goes hand in hand with all the other points that I have here. These all work together to create personal dishonesty, really. And all of this stuff works together to create personal honesty. Each part is connected to every other part in both sides. Storytelling, avoidance, distraction, being closed, and having an I know attitude all work in relation to one another to create a very dishonest human, really. And once again, this is not moral. This is not based off a moral philosophy of any kind. This is just for clarity. We want to use honesty to get really clear about life, clear about ourselves, our emotions, why we suffer, why we believe the things we do, why we're close to the things that we're close to. what kind of stuff we have stored and locked away inside of us that we want to run away from, distract ourselves from, and avoid, etc. So distraction is big. We have to be honest that we distract ourselves from our emotions, even our goals, all the things that are kind of healthy for us. We distract ourselves from ourselves, really. Our mind distracts itself from itself. We distract ourselves from how we're going to die one day because that scares the crap out of us. We distract ourselves from our relational problems, our incompetence, our shame, guilt, fear, anger, insecurity, loneliness, all this stuff. We hide it all. All gets hidden. We feel a little bit of loneliness, we run, we get into a relationship. We talk to someone immediately, which is great. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that stuff, but we have to address all the underlying deficiency within us, the whole sense of deficiency and all this emotional turmoil, which most definitely exists. You just have to be open to it, have an openness to seeing it. It's there. A great book to read is called Bringing Your Shadow Out of the Dark, Breaking Free from the Hidden Forces That Drive You by a guy named Robert Augustus Masters. Read that book. Fantastic book. Moving on from distraction, not quite. Distraction can basically be anything watching too much TV to porn, junk food, any form of running away and avoidance from something that is true that we should, that we I don't want to use the word should, that's too strong, but anything that is basically true, real, and existing, and we just avoid it, run away from it, and distract ourselves from it. This is all categorized as personal dishonesty from me. This is not an openness to seeing what is true. Instead, this is a covering up and a running away from what is true. And the way to undo that is focus and persistence. Developing focus and staying with something, persistence with something. Not having to cover it up with a story, not avoiding it, not distracting it, not closing down from it, but questioning it, having an openness to feeling it, seeing it, having it be there, accepting it, surrendering to its very existence in the present moment, and staying with it, focusing on it, and being persistent with it. Moving on, being closed-minded is a nice way to hide a lot of garbage inside of you. We want to develop open-mindedness. We don't want to be closed, rigid, ideological, fixed. This is all a perfect, what's the word I'm looking for? This is all a very perfect sign that we're being dishonest and that we're not willing to see things that are true, whether they're about ourselves emotionally, whether they're about how the world works. So basically, there's a lot of different dimensions of truth, whether it's about what reality is, what reality fundamentally is, how our emotions work, what's driving us, what we're doing in our relationships, how politics works, how the economy works, how well-being works. So I want you to think of different aspects of life: politics, spirituality, health and well-being, relationships, career. And then we have to apply our honesty to those categories and all this stuff in our life. And this is very practical. I want you to make this very practical in your life. This is not very theoretical. This is something you have to actively do. So honesty is like a guiding force in our life. It's really an important principle, ideally your number one principle for life, just in life. Because this is really how you're going to develop actual clarity in life. Without honesty, what do you have? You have, of course, dishonesty. You're going to have a foggy, clouded mind, doesn't care about what's true. It's more interested in all of this. It's more interested in storytelling, avoidance, distraction, being closed, and having an I know attitude, which I will be describing the I know attitude very shortly. And really, we just want to move away from all the stuff in the red and develop the qualities in blue. These are all skills to be worked on. These are all intrapersonal skills, really. This is all stuff happening inside of you that you have to become more aware of and open yourself up to and begin to develop. You have to really develop an ability to ask powerful questions. You have to develop the ability and the openness to see something that is true, because at first we're going to be too scared, we're going to be too closed, we're going to be afraid, we don't want to see it, we might feel ashamed of ourselves, we don't want to feel that feeling, we don't want to see that thing. We want to have our sense of security and comfort And we're going to value that over what is true. You have to develop the focus and persistence to remain with something that is occurring in the present moment, like your closure, your fear, your anxiety, your all of your personal garbage, all of your pet theories, all of the ideas that you firmly attach yourself to. You want to feel how all of that is playing out. You want to feel the emotion of being closed-minded and attaching yourself to a rigid set of beliefs. You want to feel why you get so insecure and anxious, and you want to be honest about it. You want to be clear to yourself about it. You want to state this stuff to yourself. You want to say, I am full of BS. You want to state that clearly to yourself right away. That is one of the most honest things you can actually say to yourself, is that, my God, I am full of it. Moving on. So open-mindedness. Not quite moving on. I lied. Is there anything more I can add to that? Just notice very practically in your experience when you get closed-minded. I'm going to say something very outrageous, and I want you to see how you react. The entire world is resting upon a kangaroo. I want you to actually be open to that as a possibility. Fully open your mind to that as a possibility. And notice how you have resistance to opening it. Notice that immediately you think that's completely outrageous, like I said. You think, you must be an idiot. I'm not asking you to believe what I said. I'm just asking you to be open, to let the idea enter your mind without resistance, kind of like water flowing downstream. You don't want to push and pull on the water, splash it this way, splash it that way, push it upstream. You want the water to just flow cleanly downstream, and that's what you want to do with the idea. Just let it float into your mind and then leave. Like, without struggling against it, without fighting against it, without demonizing it or hating it, or getting angry or sad or bitter or threatened or insecure or hostile or reactive or impulsive about it. All of these feelings are dead giveaways that you have some kind of personal bullshit that is running your show. So you want to really notice it on a very practical level, on the level of your direct experience, really. Just observe yourself, like develop a meditation practice. Actually observe your body, how it's tensing up, struggling, fighting. Observe your emotions, observe your thoughts. Don't get carried away and swept up in your thoughts and your storytelling. Actually just observe what's happening. Actively become aware of what's happening over and over and over and over and over and over again. This is a skill. And just like any great skill, you have to return to it. You have to have some persistence with it to actually develop it. If you want to get some nice muscles, you got to go to the gym over and over and over again. If you want to develop some nice personal honesty, you have to really do all this stuff over and over and over again and continuously desire to see where you are, I guess the word would be like impure, where you lack purity, where you are full of it. Moving on, not knowing and curiosity versus the I know attitude. This is one of the biggest ones because humans are so biased towards what they know and the sense of knowing because we find a sense of security and comfort. Whereas stuff like not knowing and curiosity is not valued really by the vast majority of people. Only really by, this kind of stuff is only valued by self-actualized human beings. Now, most people are not self-actualized human beings. Most people care more about survival and all of their beliefs and all of their stuff that they're using to basically hold their, I guess, sense of self, their sense of reality, their sense of safety together. They care more about their beliefs. They care more about really survival more than truth or self-actualization. And survival doesn't mean, this doesn't mean that you don't care about survival. It doesn't mean that you're going to go jump off a bridge because who cares about surviving. This just means that there's actually stages of human development that begin to move past survival, that begin to see reality in radically new ways that is free from a lot of our biases that we are using to get the things that we want and keep us alive. Not that we can't, of course, keep ourselves alive still, but it's just this fresher and more clearer perception of reality that I'm talking about that has to be developed. But back to this. The I know attitude. Like I already know. Oh, no, I'm not dishonest. Because it's an attitude. It's a way of relating to life. When you relate to life from this idea of, I already know, this is wrong immediately. This is completely wrong immediately. You do not have any clue what's going on here. Reality is so complicated that you just take it for granted. You're so familiar with your bedroom and YouTube videos. You have a sense of familiarity about this kind of stuff, but you don't really know what any of this is. You know what reality really is and what's going on here. You don't really have much of an idea of how your mind works, how emotions work. This stuff is so complicated. Even if you start citing the best modern science about it, in 500 years, we're going to have a lot of new research on all of this stuff that is going to make our best modern science look like first grade. So we have to be open to radically new things. We have to be open to the possibility that we have no idea what's going on here. And we have to be curious. We have to be very curious about really what's going on here, what is true. Just an openness. So all of these, once again, work in relation to one another. Questioning, openness to seeing, focus and persistence, being open-minded, not knowing and being curious. This is all some of the most important qualities that you have to actively develop in order to be personally honest. And all this stuff works together. Storytelling, avoidance, distraction, being closed, and the I know attitude. Really, we don't know much as a species. We're a very ignorant species, but we storytell ourselves the exact opposite. How we're this advanced species, we're the smartest known species, the smartest species that we know, maybe. But we like to tell ourselves that we are like heroes, and we like to really make ourselves look like we are this like benevolent force. Like humanity is just so fantastic, and we're so smart, and we have all this fantastic science, and we're so smart. But really, that's just a story. We're just storytelling. Really, if we're honest, in 2,000 years, if we keep advancing, if we keep getting new information, if we keep questioning our current assumptions, our current beliefs, everything is going to change. Every idea that we have is subject to change and be completely expanded upon, put in new context, be seen in a different way, and maybe even just be completely proven to be entirely false. And really, there's no safety in ideas. There's no safety in a belief, because that belief is bound to crumble one day. That belief is bound to, be seen as untrue, or change. Things change. Everything's always changing. And really, all of our best knowledge will be expanded upon. And not only that, all of our beliefs and all of our assumptions will be undermined and really questioned if humanity keeps evolving psychologically. Maybe it won't, but maybe it will. You see my attitude there? You see the not knowing and the openness, the curiosity? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Because really, I don't know. Because that's the honest answer. Although I think it will. But, really, truly, honestly, I don't. Truly, honestly, what do I know? There's a beautiful Socrates quote. I think it was, all I know is that I do not know. And the reason why that's so wise is because it's authentic. It is true. It is personally honest. That's why it's so profound. So be open to the idea that you are not honest, and that honesty is a skill to be developed. Open your mind to the possibility that maybe you have more of this than you have this. Maybe you don't, but maybe you do. And odds are, if you haven't been actively developing these skills, you probably have more of these, whatever these things are, these qualities. And lastly, I really want to state how this is not a moral thing. Honesty is it's usually seen as just this very moral thing, how you're bad if you're telling a lie. This is not the light that I'm trying to shine upon honesty. This is not what I'm trying to say. This is usually a byproduct of our unconscious shame, how you should be ashamed of yourself if you're dishonest. You shouldn't be, be ashamed of yourself if you want to be. But really, there's no shame in being dishonest. I'm not viewing this from a good or bad perspective. I'm viewing this purely from a what is true perspective, what is actually occurring, from the perspective of not knowing and curiosity and just being open and focusing and being persistent with it, having an openness to seeing what is the case and just questioning what is true. And that's basically it for this video. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Other than that, take it easy.